Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to another Books Weekly. For those of you who might be new to the channel, my Books Weekly is a Sunday video in which I talk about the books that I've either finished last week, started from a previous week, or read last week, or just started this weekend. And the first book I want to talk to you about is indeed the book that I've started, I think, 2 weeks ago and then finished end of November, and that is Virginie Despentes, The Life of Vernon Subutex. This is the German edition, but the book is obviously has been written in French, but it's also available in English. The book was published in 2015 in France and made quite a splash. Now, Virginie Despentes wasn't unknown as a literary figure in France. She's born in 1969, and she made her entrance with a very controversial book that was in France even on the index, called Baise-moi, which roughly translates into English, Fuck Me, in which she is quite graphic about sex. Then there was a while of silence, and now a couple of years ago she started with the Vernon Subutex trilogy. This is the first installment. The other two will be translated into English and German, I think, starting in the spring of next year. Now, Vernon Subutex is the tale of Vernon, who was once a quite well-known figure in his environment in Paris. He had a record store, and people would come there and buy records, and he was well connected with the punk rock scene in the 1980s and 90s. And then 10 years before the novel opens, the record store went bankrupt, and Vernon lived on welfare and with the help of friends. And when the book opens, he just received the news that his welfare checks will be cancelled, and he is removed from his house, so he's homeless and without any money and any income. And then the book tells you all the friends that he visits, male and female, friends from his past who have also been in the punk rock scene back then, but are now either, a well-to-do banker or a scriptwriter, but also people who didn't make it into wealth. And then it's more of a kaleidoscope of people with one very thin plot line, because one of the biggest benefactors of Vernon dies at the beginning of the novel. He was a very well-known singer, rock star, and there are supposedly secret tapes about him, and Vernon is supposedly in the possession of these tapes. So that is the very, very thin plot line that connects all these various people, while Vernon wanders through Paris from one, temporary lodging to the next, and spiraling down more and more and more. It was not my kind of book. I probably should say that right from the start. It reminded me too much of Houellebecq, and Houellebecq has never been my kind of writer. I don't especially like the language. It's very graphic. You have fuck and ass and damn at least 10 times on every page. I'm exaggerating, but at least once on every page. And I couldn't really connect to any of the stories. I'm not familiar with the punk scene back in the 1980s, and it's a very French book. And I think I said it when I talked about it, that I started it, that I'm reading it for a real life book club, and we were with the 6 of us, and 3 of us really, really loved it. So I think if you are interested in this, period in Paris, as sort of a picture of people not really making it, and very graphic scenes of pornography and sex and drugs and rock and roll. If you like Houellebecq, then this might be a good pick for you, but it was just not for me. After Vernon Subutex, which was not quite my thing, as I said, I thought I'm in for something, some light reading, and I chose science fiction by Nancy Kress, Yesterday's Kin. Now, Nancy Kress, for those of you who read science fiction, who love science fiction, is a household name. She's an American science fiction writer, and she has been writing and publishing science fictions over 4 decades. So Yesterday's Kin is a short novella about Nancy Kress's take on a first encounter. So we have aliens, when the book opens, we have aliens already present in the US. They communicate through a mechanical translating device only with the United Nations, and the main protagonist is a scientist called Marion Jenner, who does DNA research, and she just discovered something, and then she is invited together with a couple of other high-profile figures into the embassy, as it's called, where the aliens is sort of a ship building hovering over the harbor, and she's invited in there to do some research, and everything takes off from there. Marianne has 3 children, Elizabeth, who is a border patrol policewoman, her son Ryan, who is also a researcher, biologist, and the youngest son Noah, who is kind of a washout. I can't tell you much of the plot because that would be too much of a giveaway. Let's just say I thought it was a very interesting, different take on the relationship between aliens and humans and how stuff can develop from there. It's also quite a political book. As I said, one of Marion's children, her daughter Elizabeth, is a border patrol police woman because the US has engaged in an isolationist politics. So they control borders, they won't let anybody in. So you have these bits and pieces that sound quite topical and current, but it's a sci-fi book. And I really liked it. It's a short novella, and if you're interested in reading it, Nancy Kress then expanded this novella into a novel, which has been published in July of this year, called Tomorrow's Kin. So if you read Yesterday's Kin and then think Tomorrow's Kin might be the next book in this series, that's only partly true, because the first part of Tomorrow's Kin is the story of Yesterday's Kin, and then it's expanded. But I really liked it, and I thought it was, a fun, fast-paced sci-fi read, well-written, and with a lot of interesting topics that you can think about. The next book I read last week is a little less frivolous. It's a memoir, Susanna Kaysen, A Girl Interrupted. The book was first published in 1993. This is a later edition after the movie came out. There was a movie made in 1999 with Winona Ryder, if you can see her probably, as the main protagonist, so as Susanna, and also with Angelina Jolie as Linda, one of Susanna Kaysen's friends in this memoir. The memoir is about Susanna's stay in a mental hospital. She was hospitalized for 18 months in the late 1960s after she took 50 aspirin and too much vodka, and the psychiatrist was convinced that she would try to kill herself again and that she needs to be hospitalized. She spent it was a voluntary admission, but still she spent 18 months there, and this is the memoir about that time in McLean Hospital. It is, I think it's an interesting read for people who are interested in a memoir about mental health, about the mental health system, about young women, because they are in that ward where Susanna has spent those 18 months. They're all young women. It's snippets of information about the women there, about the way Susanna was admitted. So it's not a memoir in the sense that it starts with the admission and then you have a plot structure going on until Susanna is released. It's more little vignettes of what happens, focusing on certain other patients. Linda, as I said, is a very prominent figure. And it tells you also, I think, something about the time in the late 1960s in the United States, how, and not only in the US, by the way, but how young women who were struggling to find their place in life, how they were looked upon and how they were frowned upon, and how that transformed itself into mental health issues. So if this is a topic that seems interesting to you, I can certainly recommend it, but it's a very thin book, and don't go in it expecting a narration, a memoir in the form of a narration. Like I said, it's more focusing on topics, on little snippets, but I thought it was a really interesting read. And the movie I can certainly recommend as well. The 1999 movie is very well done, and Angelina Jolie as Linda is very convincing. So either try the book if you're interested in that topic, or maybe if not, you could try out the movie. And the last book I want to mention is the book that I've just started this weekend, and that is Margaret Atwood, Negotiating with the Dead. Margaret Atwood doesn't need an introduction. She's one of the most famous Canadian writers. And yes, Sean, I included another Canadian author, finally. And this book is reflections on writing. It says on the subtitle, A Writer on Writing. Margaret Atwood was asked to do a series of lectures in the year 2000 about writing, and from these lectures she developed the book in which she asked questions: why do you write? What is a writer? So it's not a memoir as such, but it's, like I said, reflections of Atwood on her writing and writing in general. So this was it for my Books Weekly for this very dreary and cold Sunday. We had the first snow here in Cologne today on the 3rd of December. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. I'm looking forward, as always, to talking to you in the comments, and I'll see you all soon in my next video. Bye-bye.